we're ready? Great, then let's begin. Once upon a time, there was a boxer named Rocky Balboa. He fights out of the mean streets of 1970s Philadelphia, and while he might be dirt poor, he has a heart of gold. He pours his blood, sweat, and tears into his sport every day, and before you know it, one training montage later, and he's fighting for the heavyweight world championships. This is how the film Rocky sets the stage for the ultimate inspirational underdog sports movie. Unfortunately, however, Rocky loses the championship. At the end of the fight, there's a mixture of blood and sweat dripping down his face. But you know what else is on his face? A smile. Why? Well, because even though Rocky lost the championship, he goes the distance. A term in boxing meaning to endure every round without quitting. He's proud of himself for the character that it took to quite literally never throw in the towel. Not just during the fight, but in the training as well. See, for as many times as Rocky's been hit in the head, he still understood one simple truth. One that I want to share with you today. That the journey is more important than the destination because of how it shapes our character. So today, let's step into the ring and examine why Rocky was so obsessed with going the distance. First, we'll take a jab at how our culture overemphasizes the destinations in life. Next, we'll bob and weave through the harms of this mentality, before finally countering with some solutions. Unfortunately, in our modern day and age, despite how beloved the Rocky films are, it seems that nobody really takes this message to heart. From students cheating on a test, to athletes abusing steroids, to politicians lying to win elections. We value external achievement more than internal growth. And our day-to-day conversations reflect this. Currently, we only give character-based praise as a last resort, when there's nothing else to compliment. Like when a sports team is getting demolished, but the commentary has to remain unbiased, so they praise how much effort and determination the losing team has, rather than their actual skills. Or like when you give your speech to your coach for the first time, and the only positive thing she can say is, "Michael, I really liked how much effort you put into this one." But seriously, when we overemphasize the importance of external achievement, we forget about the character of our actions that success is truly defined by. For example, a study published by Economic Inquiry found that couples who spent more on their weddings were also more likely to get divorced because they prioritized surface-level success over the underlying character traits that lead to a lasting marriage. Now, we often don't mean to think this way, but it's so hard not to. Because whether it's social media apps, dating apps, or frankly, even college apps, in the court of our culture's conscience, the destinations in life are the only thing that matters. But while these institutions rely on external metrics in order to turn a profit, according to psychologist Tim Kasser, when individuals prioritize extrinsic goals, it correlates to higher levels of anxiety and depression. And that is the harm that I fear most. When this mindset is not only institutionalized, but also internalized by individuals as a means for determining their self-worth. See, most of us want to be loved for who we are and not just what we achieved. I mean, if you had a friend who only made you feel valued when you achieved something, you'd be like, dude, that's a terrible friend, right? Yet, so many of us treat ourselves this way, myself included. Which is why this topic is so important to me. Because growing up in Silicon Valley, one of the most competitive regions in the world, I internalized this message that I'm defined by my achievements. So earlier this school year, when I took the SAT, I didn't just see it as another test. I saw it as a measurement of who I was. As a result, I studied relentlessly. I brought work with me on vacations. I woke up early and stayed up late doing hundreds of practice problems. But on the day of the test, I fell short. And in that moment, I not only felt like all my hard work was for nothing, but that I too amounted to nothing. And I told myself that that's how I deserved to feel for failing. And that once I do achieve enough, then I'll finally start to feel like I'm enough. when I heard the story of Madison Hollering. She had a great GPA, she was a D1 athlete, and she was admitted into an Ivy League university. She was everything that I aspired to be. However, as author Kate Fagan insightfully noted in her biography of Madison's life, even though she achieved a lot, Madison still tied her identity to her achievements. Which meant that one day, when she went through a particular point of academic and athletic struggle, it would then translate into an identity struggle. So much so that she left a note in her dorm room reading, "I don't know who I am anymore." And later that day, she made the decision to take her own life. Madison's story demonstrates that no amount of external success will ever be able to fully remedy our internal struggle. As entrepreneur Alex Hormozy once put it, you've already achieved things that you said would have made you happy. So if nothing in this world is ever enough to satisfy us, then how do we solve this? Well, traditional wisdom tells us to just enjoy the journey, but unfortunately, life isn't all sunshine and rainbows, so that's more of a fortune cookie and less of a solution. Real solutions come from Scripture. Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 to 21 says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and rust do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Those treasures in heaven are what God values, our inner growth. So the solution is to focus on the character that we develop along our journeys, because what we value will then shape how we act. A study conducted by Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck found that children who were praised for their effort, rather than their results, developed a stronger work ethic and a greater willingness to take on challenges. Because when character is valued more than external achievement, people have a reason to keep giving their best regardless of the results, since they aren't discouraged when losing and they aren't complacent when winning. Additionally, Andrew Huberman, a professor of neurobiology at Stanford University, found that the more we practice a character trait, the stronger the neural pathways in our brain for that character become, and the more likely we are to repeat it in any future area of life. So, going back to my example, as it turns out, my journey with the SAT wasn't such a waste after all. Because every time that I pushed myself to study, especially when it was the last thing I felt like doing, every time that I failed another practice test yet chose to keep going, I scientifically became a more resilient and disciplined person, not just for the SAT, but in any future area of life. As Steve Maraboli once put it, sometimes the greatest thing to come out of all your hard work isn't what you get for it, but who you become for it. So I like to think of this as me becoming the Rocky Balboa of the SAT. Ironically, Rocky is also how you could describe my current academic situation. But seriously, our journeys are intended to shape us into who God destines us to be. Because as the philosopher Seneca once articulated, character is not made in a crisis, it is only exhibited. In the Bible, David had the character and skills to defend God's people from Goliath because he developed it through years of practicing by defending his livestock in the field. Moses had to tend sheep for 40 years in the wilderness before God finally called him to shepherd Israel. Now for us, it could look like a variety of things. Being patient with an annoying coworker could be God's way of developing your patience for when he blesses you with an annoying child someday. Keeping a good attitude when you lose a sports game helps you to keep a godly attitude when you lose something much more important in life. And of course, preparing your speeches prepares you to speak boldly for Christ as you go out into the world. And yeah, it might seem a little tedious or mundane at times to be building our character day to day. But as Rocky himself once said, that's how winning is done. The sooner we start to think like Rocky and recognize that the journey is more important than the destination because of how it shapes our character, the sooner we'll be able to create a culture that's less focused on the destinations and more focused on going the distance. Thank you so much.